The first thing I think this defines for us is it defines who we are as a church, right? And what this defines for us more clearly than anything else is that we are an outward-oriented church. Suncrest always has been, as long as I'm around, always will be. Now, this is very important because it's actually very common in people's lives and in churches' lives and probably in your business or organization's life to have a picture of yourself that may or may not actually be accurate. There's a big kind of dust-up in church leadership circles just a week or so ago because there was a survey that came out, and here's what the survey found. It surveyed churches, and it asked churches, how many of you, churches, think of yourself as a friendly church? And the answer was 80% of churches think of themselves as friendly churches. They would define themselves that way. And then they did a survey of a lot of people who had visited all of these churches, and they asked the people who had actually visited the churches, what was your experience in visiting these churches? And 80% of the people said those churches were not friendly churches, right? Now, you can tell yourself a story. You can act as though you're a certain way. You can imagine to define yourself some way, but you only are what people's experience around you actually is. And for me and for Suncrest, for all of our days, we have to be an outward church. Now, there's a sentence we use. This is one of our 5 kind of core markers of the values. And there's a sentence we use to describe this outward. Here's what that says. It says, we regularly sacrifice for those who are not part of our church. That's who Suncrest is. We will regularly sacrifice for those who are not part of our church. And some of you have heard me say this before, but I don't have a bigger job at Suncrest than to defend that value. Here's what happens in church life. Church life drifts inward. When you're new to the church, you're very thankful that a church has an outward value because you've been on the outside and you're coming in. But once you're part of a church for a little while, the great tendency of a church is to drift inward. And if we just listen to the voices that are within a church, and thank God this doesn't happen at Suncrest frequently, you would have this tendency to say, so the conversation moves to taking care of ourselves. But somebody has to be the voice for the person who isn't here yet. Somebody has to be the voice for the person who's in need, that still needs an outward church. And I own the responsibility of being that voice. So if we do what I think we'll do this weekend, here's what will happen at Suncrest. We will do nothing to make ourselves more comfortable. Nothing. We will take great steps of generosity in order to create more space so as to not limit our growth. We will be defined not by the 1,200 people who attend our church, but by the 500,000 people in Northwest Indiana who attend no church at all. And to say, we will be generous in such a way that we will be regularly sacrificing for those who are not part of our church. And not only that, we will be a church that looks at the deepest and darkest corners of Northwest Indiana, that acknowledges that there is real need, and most of the time people walk past it and ignore it, but we won't do that. We won't. We will look at the darkest, most difficult, most broken places of Northwest Indiana, and we say we'll walk into that. We'll use it with our generosity, we'll use it with our volunteers. We won't stand with a big check for $1,200 and get our picture in the paper. We will take hundreds of thousands of dollars and hundreds of people, and we will be an outward church that will regularly sacrifice for those who aren't part of our church. That's what's happening this weekend. We are defining who we are.